I guess Dean and Kieran, if you guys want to introduce yourself and a bit about the kind of projects you're working on.
Sure. So my name's Dean Anderson. I'm a co-founder of Gamestatix. Gamestatix is essentially a new type of early access platform for PC games. So consider it Steam Early Access meets Steam It. The difference between what we're doing and what Steam Early Access do is users within the platform will be financially incentivized to engage with developers in a positive way. On the flip side of that, developers will now have access to a carefully curated community which they can leverage for content creation, game promotion, and things like community management.
Hi.
Quickly, yeah.
Hello. Yeah, I am Arthur Madrid. I'm the founder of Sandbox. We are trying to bring a platform for game creators and game makers on the blockchain.
Great. My name is Kieran Farr. I am an advisor for Decentraland. It is a virtual community, virtual world that runs on the Ethereum blockchain. And excited to be with you guys on this panel.
Cool, good. So,
great company on Decentraland.
Yes,
how many people knows Decentraland here?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
good,
okay.
good.
That's
good.
really great company.
Excellent. Okay, so we're talking about tokens to build platforms. I guess whether we should be talking about platforms or not, I don't know if that's a term that's very. Everything's kind of a platform in the blockchain world, isn't it? But let's not dig too much into that kind of abstract stuff. So, talking about, I guess, the tokens, and I guess maybe starting with you, Dean. How have you thought about? Because if you're doing a game, the kind of a token can be quite clear. Obviously, in a card game, we know what a token does. For building platforms, that can be quite abstract. And if it's abstract, then how do your community understand what it's for and the value, and how do you kind of create that flow in the economy?
So I think one of the key things for any platform who is creating it, who has a token within it, is the token needs to have utility. So people have to be able to use the token within the platform. In our case, users will be using GSX to purchase games within the platform, and they can also earn GSX through engaging with developers in a positive way. So, for example, if a game's in early access and a developer needs ideas and feedback, depending on the quality of those ideas and feedback, they will be rewarded with X amount of GSX. If, for example, a player wants to create a piece of user-generated content that would then be implemented into the game, again, the users will be incentivized with GSX. So what we're trying to do is build a sort of a virtuous cycle or economy so that players can earn GSX within the platform, which allows them to spend more money on games within the platform, which should fund the development.
Yeah. Well, an interesting thing there, where I guess the primary use of your token will be to buy games. Now, we all know kind of what the cost of games is in fiat currency at the moment.
Yes.
So that kind of pegs the value of kind of what your tokens are. And I guess in some other platforms that we've seen at the moment is, certainly some of the ones I've looked at, is you might do an activity and get one token, but to buy a game it's going to be like 30,000 tokens, and suddenly there's a massive disconnect and you realise you're going to have to spend your entire year earning the $50 you need to buy Overwatch or something. I mean, how do you get around those?
Well, so one of the ways that makes it easier for people to understand the value of the token is we can display the value of the token in US dollars, for example, so it's not 0.0001. I guess that's the way we're getting around it.
Okay.
How deep have you got into thinking about? Because I guess you're very early, aren't you, really?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Like what Dean just said about making people keep the token. Like what you really want to avoid, it's having speculators that just come to buy your token and sell it at the ICO. But also, even in the way the games must be played, you need to think about what you just say about moderation, governance tokens that going to incentive players to keep those tokens and bring more value. Also, what's something that sounds very obvious is like, for an investor point of view, why also crypto game sounds a good investment. It's like more players you're going to get. If you limit some of the asset of the game, probably the value of the tokens is going to increase. So at the end, it's also like how many players you're gonna get. And right now there are very few games having enough players to really understand the equation between their use and the value of the token. Like, and if there is a value, it's ridiculous. It's maybe $1 million for the AU. Yeah. But definitely it's extremely smart the way you can use. Defines this token economy, and it's been much more advanced right now than 8 months ago. 8 months ago, nobody really cared about the way the token economy is going to be built. Now people really want, and much more concepts are coming. And I let you.
And with Decentraland, I mean, of all the projects, you're the most advanced. I mean, the mana token is, as much as these things are, fairly liquid. So how have you had that kind of speculator? You obviously have quite an active community working in the game as well. How that kind of synergy?
Well, maybe I can answer that question and also kind of take a step back and give a sense of, so when we use the word token, it can sometimes be overloaded because there's different types of tokens, right? And different tokens have different utility, and then sometimes there's literal different types of tokens by the standard, like ERC20 or ERC721. So what's interesting to me about Decentraland and why I decided to join the team is that there's actually 2 different types of tokens that the project uses, and that they were useful at different points in time for different purposes. So back almost a year ago, so August of last year, there was the initial offering of the mana token in exchange for Ether. And so that was meant to start to fund the project, and then to give people early access to the in-game currency that would then be used to purchase land. And so I'll state the obvious, the mana token is an ERC20, so it's fungible. You can have a percentage of it. A token is a token, you can give it to other people. Then later in the year, we wanted to actually have land that was purchasable by people to start building out their virtual land. And so we created a token for that called the land token, making it simple. And that is an ERC721 compliant token, so same as a CryptoKitty. Its uniqueness is not its tail color or its eyeballs, it's the unique coordinates of the land. And so by having these 2 different tokens, it's been really interesting to see the economics build from it. So you can track these things separately. There is the market for mana. That goes up and down depending upon all sorts of things. The value of Ether and Bitcoin would be one of them. And then land is very interesting because there's a very different value system. And a lot of that is based on the location and adjacency to other parcels. So I hope that helps just kind of set the high-level foundation. We can go into more details, but is that kind of helpful?
Yeah, no, absolutely good. Do we have any questions at this stage? People want to jump in? No? So let's dig in a bit, because your product is the most advanced. I mean, how are you seeing when you're selling the land, that's something you guys own as a developer, but if the value of that, the value is dependent on the location already within the game and what other users are there, how does that change how you're pricing that kind of land?
So what's interesting is that if you kind of look at the current stage of the project right now, what is in quote-unquote production, like what people can actually use today, is the land marketplace. So it's equivalent in complexity to the CryptoKitty marketplace. There's lots of unique elements that each token has its own things, whether it's eye color, the bushy tails, or in this case, the location. And so that brings up all sorts of different UI elements. There's a map, all this fun stuff. So that's usable today. And what's interesting is to see the network effects, what happens when you have large groups of people bidding on these things. Now today, it's pretty much literally a pixel. Like, that is about the information that we know about your land. We know its location. We know its adjacencies to roads or to other districts. So to give some context, in Decentraland, there's a 300 by 300 grid of land. Each land parcel is 10 by 10 meters. So that's roughly twice the size of Central Park in Manhattan. So these parcels were put up for an initial auction in January, and you could exchange mana for these land tokens. But we have just started to now release the tools to allow landowners to develop on them. But those are still early. So what's fascinating for me is that there is a very active market for land right now, beyond what I would have ever expected. And a lot of this is speculation. So it's building in kind of like a futures market. The price includes what people believe they can build out in the future. And so for better or worse, what this means for Decentraland is that when we do things like release our SDK and have it be usable, that has a meaningful impact on the perceived value, because it's showing people that you can actually do something with it, and it's reinforcing the value that a lot of people have baked in already to the purchase of
And
it.
as you had those two, have you seen kind of the speculators move from mana to land? I mean, have you seen that kind of, has the volume changed between those two different types of token currency as one's become a bit more speculative, I suppose?
Yeah, so I am not an economist, and I can't say here's my PhD study and all this sort of stuff. But I would say that the general sentiment on the chat boards, whether it's Reddit or the internal chat between other people, would be that at first there was nothing else besides mana if you were a speculator and trying to make a quick buck. Now there is also land. Now there's a tension here, and I know you guys were saying this as well, that you don't want your entire community made up of speculators. And so one of the things that I'm working with is helping onboard a large group of developers that come from, for example, web development. So they have all these existing skill sets, and we're able to use that same development cycle, the tools and the flow of a web developer, and help convert them to also be capable of creating experiences on the Decentraland SDK. So that's what we're focused on right now, and the hope is that then we're actually providing the real utility. Getting back to what you're saying, there's a function that these tokens can serve, and now it's our job to make sure that we actually fulfill that promise.
Dean, with you're a very different sort of project.
Yes.
What stage are you at in terms of tokens being available in the kind of project, and how much have you thought about that speculation thing versus long-term use?
We're still pre-launch. We're moving towards an ICO, which will come in around Q4 of this year.
Okay.
But in terms of thinking about speculation, we are using two tokens. We're using an ERC20 token. We're also using the 721 tokens, but we're using them in a slightly different way. So for the 721 token, we're using that to allow users who are creating content to prove ownership of content, which developers can then license or purchase that content and implement into their games. In terms of speculation, it's very difficult to avoid it, I guess, especially when you're trying to build an ICO community. Investors, at the end of the day, are investors, and in an ideal scenario, we would be working with investors who are going to become users of the platform and who would hold that token long term. But it's very difficult to filter them out, and yeah, that's a massive challenge for us now.
I personally feel fascinated by the capacity on crypto games to come up with very abstract things, and as you say, and I don't think it's as bad as some people say, and because sometimes it's like the way we imagine metaverse or the way we project how can be the futures. It's something very personal and something based on imagination. And I see a lot of projects as yours, attracting so many interest on something so little than a pixel, but in some way it's much more. And so yeah, I think it's also exciting, even if it's messy or doesn't have any strong economics fundamentals. It's still fascinating because it's also based on some cyberpunk literacy or some concept that has been developed in gaming the last 25 years. So even if those guys may be speculators, I guess they understand a little bit some kind of futurism.
Yep. They're speculating for a reason. Yeah, that's right. It's true. Like crypto is a game itself. Like bitcoins and speculation, it's a game itself. That's someone said before, and I really like what he said. So it's like if everything is a game, like even the speculator is a gamer. So yes.
So I'm trying to.
That's right, and I would say that for some people already, the land marketplace at Decentraland has as much utility as they need.
Yeah.
And I'll share a story, by the way, and I just got lucky. At the very beginning when the land marketplace launched, there was a very high volume, and I owned a couple pieces of land, and I decided to try selling some, buying some, and in the first 48, 72 hours, it was like a high because I was able to sell certain properties, make other ones, like purchase other ones that were close to a road but were undervalued because someone was just selling it. And that right there was part of the experience. Now, for me, that's not the long-term end-all be-all, but like you're saying, for some people that is, I mean, that is the game. And for a lot of these early crypto games, like CryptoKitties, there's not much more that you can do besides reproduce them and sell them. So it's kind of the stage that we're at. I guess the other thing that's interesting to hear all of us talk about is that there is a tension that's necessary between the ratio of speculators or people that are using your tokens as an asset class and then perhaps active participants or creators that are the ones that are adding value by doing stuff with the tokens. And the reality is that you can't have one without the other, right? So what we're experiencing with all of our projects right now is that the speculators are the reason that they exist today. So we want to support them. But if we had a world of only the speculators, then nothing would be built out. And so it's fascinating to see how is this stuff going to meet in the middle. And I'll give you a real-life scenario where this is an issue. So unlike other platforms out there for metaverses, there is a real cost to land. So let's say I'm a starving artist, to use the stereotype. It may not be feasible for me to go out there and buy land today. But if I am a speculator that owns hundreds of parcels, I don't want them to be empty, and I would like to be able to capture the value of my land. So I'm incentivized to find a way to work with the artists. Now, what we're not telling people is, here's how you must engage with your artists. And there are hundreds of models from the real world, because this is the same problem in San Francisco, right? We don't know what the answer is. And I'm not saying that there's a magical solution. It's going to be very messy. But it's interesting to see how this is all happening, and there's tons of different answers, and people are talking about mortgages or leases that are enforced through smart contracts. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know.
Very quickly, when you say high volume, I mean, I guess we're all very interested. I mean, Arthur just mentioned it. You know, you look at that radar and just see the DAUs. What, in terms of individuals, what kind of volume are you seeing?
So there's a couple thousand individual owners of land. So that ranges from an individual that owns one parcel. I think the largest I've heard of is 600 parcels. I mean, maybe there's more. I don't know. I would say that in terms of the kind of the patterns here, there was a lot of exchanges of land toward the beginning when the marketplace was available. Before the official marketplace was available, what we saw were people doing unofficial transactions, like through Reddit or through chat, saying they would hold an auction and they would have people manually come up with prices. I think that the next big event will be related to having people put different experiences out there. So having the SDK in as many people's hands as possible, and we're seeing close to 100 registrations per day of people that are signing up and playing with the tools. And then actually seeing some of those experiences become published and letting people actually interact with it, that's going to be the next point at which I think that the volume will significantly increase again.
And yeah, coming from the freemium in business, we're like, you really need now at least 10 million installed to exist on mobile gaming, or even more. But definitely it's depend on who is playing, and like right now I think like all those crypto players are all whales, and that's a pretty good thing, even if I think this is gonna change, like and when the volume's gonna, I think volume in even in real finance, just like any micro cap or small cap business in any stock markets, just if you see how easy it is to make them move with very low, they are very volatile because of the low volume.
Yes.
So as soon as your company gonna have the real tools to make real players coming, then we see how those business gonna work, which I think it's the main point. It's at the end, like we need to have real players also using the tools you're developing.
I guess, but what you're trying to do, Dean, is obviously kind of players, consumers are one part of it, but also you talk about developers as well. So how are you dealing with that aspect of
in terms of onboarding developers?
Yeah. So what kind of experiences are you getting?
I think with any platform, one of the first challenges you'll face is the proverbial chicken and egg problem. So it's, you know, which users come first. So in our case, it's developers or players. The approach that we're taking to it is we want to put together a portfolio of content that will showcase the features within the platform, and that portfolio of content will essentially act as an anchor. So right now it's important for us to get out and sort of agree partnerships with developers and sort of work with well-known studios who can help bring awareness to the platform, because ultimately it's the content that's going to bring the players to the platform, and that's what's going to give us scale, and with scale we can start to build a more stable economy.
Are you finding people are interested and active, or?
People, yeah, we've had a really great response so far. As I say, it's very early. We've only just started to go public in the last, 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
But yeah, the response has been great so far, especially from, our target audience are small independent studios, so people who have maybe 2 or 4 people within the studio, and they don't have resource to necessarily take their game to market.
So in terms of location, like, which are the demographics of your, where does your player come from, you two, mainly?
Yeah, so just to clarify on the profiles that we have right now, we focus on the landowners and then the creators, including developers. We're not yet focused on the end users. But of those 2 groups, we find a very strong contingent in North America, Europe, and then Asia. A lot of interest in Korea, specifically on crypto topics in general, but on Decentraland. A lot of interest in China. There also, in China seems to be an interesting overlap. There's a lot of interest in VR in China, and then there's a lot of interest in crypto. So there's an interesting overlap there for Decentraland specifically.
So the demographics that we're targeting at the moment in terms of players are primarily UK and Western Europe, and that's because we are moving towards an ICO. So right now we've excluded the US from the ICO. So the first community that we build will ultimately be an investor community, and hopefully we can convert a portion of that investor community to our initial user base.
Good. At this stage, we've got any questions from the audience? Suddenly all very reticent. Oh, no, one at the back. Just wait for the microphone. If you can say who you are.
Dave with Busca Corp. What have you done in terms of bringing stability to your zoning and usage rights, and then also in terms of features in your SDK, giving the property owners different capabilities that would affect the value, and how have you kind of set that sandbox so people can kind of assess and have stability in the valuation over time?
Good question. This is a pretty Decentraland specific question. So a couple different answers. So first of all, at a high level, there already existed, prior to land being purchased or made available, there already existed a layout for the city that had central zones, kind of like a star layout, that were kind of common areas, and then roadways. And then there's a mixture of individual parcels that people can purchase that are throughout the common areas and roadways. And then there's a separate concept called districts. And a district is a large area where multiple users have purchased into it. So depending upon whether it's a personal parcel that you've purchased or it's a district, there's very different rules. For a district, it's up to the district organizers how they're going to organize it and how they're going to run it. And right now there's a huge range depending upon everything from the size to the level of seriousness that people are taking them. Some of them are doing these DAOs, distributed autonomous organizations. They're having a whole smart contract. They're letting people vote on stuff. Other people, it's very top down. They're controlling everything. They took your 1,000 mana and they're doing whatever they want with it. Everywhere in between. So that's districts. Now, as a practical matter, when it comes to the Decentraland client, part of the SDK is that there's code that is sandboxed, that as a parcel owner, I can choose what code I'm going to allow on my parcel. And what this means is that I may or may not allow selected third-party code. I'll just give you a stupid example. Let's say someone comes up with a script that makes you into Superman and you can fly everywhere, right? As a parcel owner, I can decide, do you have the right to do that or not? Now, to be clear, because everything's open source, the definition of the parcels is open source. You can look in the blockchain, see what my unique ID is, and then find the information that defines my parcel on IPFS. We can't stop people, nor do we want to, from creating their own clients that do allow people to run whatever scripts they want. So to some degree, we don't have control. That said, we are making the official client, and we're saying, here's what we think is the best way to build a community, but we don't stop people from doing that. So I didn't exactly answer your question, but there's lots of different ways then, practically speaking, that reality affects the value of people's land.
For Sandbox, we try like to observe like what's happening on Roblox or on Minecraft. It's probably where our two projects separate. Like we don't believe what the experience we want to do in Voxel may be like everything or anything, but it's actually a gaming experience with a representation of the players as an avatar, and keeping this representation makes the imagination of the players able to do anything they want under this idea of digital Lego and so on. But what we want, I really used to love playing Minecraft at the very beginning when you were really able to customize everything. Like, so we're also thinking about how to let players do any rules they want. Like if they want to do like a battle royale game, or if they want to do a builder game. Another thing that we work on is it's what we call the social map, where basically every players come with their like the world on the sandbox is limited size, so you come with your avatar and your world, and some gameplays just come up with combining the world of everybody, and they can just come up all together to build something together or to fight each other. So we're really excited about those kind of features. But I think for this kind of project, about user-generated content project, we really believe in it to have a framework, or we have some kind of aesthetics, and we don't want to go VR, we don't want to go AR. Like I'm it's the only thing that I don't like in Decentraland. Basically, it's like saying to people you can do anything, but because it's just like on the blockchain is difficult, but even in technically, we are not yet be able to do anything.
So actually, there's a question I did want to ask, which is not about tokens at all, but Decentraland is very much a VR-focused project, which seemed slightly odd to me. I don't know if that's just me. I mean, why was that decision taken, given that VR hasn't really taken off in the same way? Will it always be a VR-focused project, or could it become a
It's a good question. So I think there's different reasons. So I think you had mentioned something that was appropriate. I liked it, saying that there is a lot of ideas that people are putting of their own into what this project can be with relatively little information. And I think that we got lucky that the team behind Decentraland has the capability to ship code, because the same concept people could have pitched and delivered nothing. Yeah. So first of all, I've been very impressed that the team actually is delivering code that works, compared to other even much simpler blockchain projects that raised a bunch of money. You know, decentralized storage. You know, 1 of 5 has actually shipped something. So that's impressive, and I'm happy to see that. Now, you had mentioned something interesting about letting people do anything, and then whether or not VR makes sense. What I think is going to happen is that people are going to make their own clients. And honestly, I think that's going to be, if we are successful, people are going to make clients for different purposes. One of the use cases for Decentraland that we're seeing is the most popular is crypto collectibles. People want to be able to do something with their crypto kitties. Literally, they want to see them in 3D, or they want to have them interact with other kitties. This may be something that lends itself much more to a mobile app than to VR. So there's nothing written in stone that we must have this project be only VR in the future, and there also is nothing that stops people from making their own mobile-first client.
Yeah, but because your project is very real estate oriented, and VR, it's quite a 3D projection of, like, if it's just at the end a mobile app to see my crypto kitty, is quite far, but the real estate projection that I feel. But you're right, it may be just like a protocol for people to create any projection they want, and I am totally excited by this too. But VR, yeah.
Yeah, but your point is valid. I think that if it's only VR, there's a limited group.
Yeah.
I do think that it will need to be open to not just strictly VR.
Where's that?
Yo.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Thank you, Arthur.
I just wrote a book on using virtual reality for drug rehabilitation and mental health. One of the recommendations was that people who graduate from rehabs go into areas together for ongoing treatment, which they need for years and years afterwards in apartment buildings or trailer parks or whatnot. Is there any reason your districts couldn't be used for doing communities like that with common interests, such as therapy. Because it's healthcare, it absolutely needs security, like HIPAA kind of security. You wouldn't want to do it on a normal game area.
So yes, it would be possible, and in fact, there are certain districts that are specifically trying to create these zones. There's like the Green District for wellness, there's the Conference District, there's Decentraland University, and all these things have similar goals of having a meeting space that you don't have to be a landowner to be able to have these meetings, bring people together. The vision of the product is to have secure peer-to-peer communications. I would not say that that is the current product. Like, it is not HIPAA compliant by design as of today.
Use blockchain.
Yeah, so it uses the blockchain. So that would be perhaps a goal. I'd say right now it's public, it's open, so there's not necessarily this private component. But everything else you're saying, yes, it's possible.
Oh.
Okay. Good. Microphone's coming.
I'm still Francesco. And I have a question. When you buy some land in the real world, what happens is that there are so many factors that create the value of the land. The kind of soil, if you can create some agriculture, or if it's good for breeding some animal, or there are hills, it's protected from the possible wars. There are so many elements that that are very important. For example, there is a difference between a city and a country, for sure, but why a city is there? Take New York, for example. Why is there? Because it was well protected from all around. Manhattan was very well protected. So how all these things are managed inside Decentraland? I'm curious.
So I would say right now in Decentraland, there's many fewer variables around what is the perceived value of land. The variables that I would suggest, of course, everyone's different, would be that there's the concept of these central meeting points, and it's arranged like a star. And as far as getting people to go into your space organically, you'll have the highest chance of that because they'll spawn near those points. So that could be one metric of value, is how close are you to foot traffic that doesn't require teleporting. Then there is a self-referential value of, are other properties around me valuable? So for example, there are these districts. There are parcels that are adjacent to the districts. Depending upon the public reports of the district's progress, different districts have different perceived values. So that's another mechanism of having perceived value. There is the concept of roads. Maybe that's valuable, maybe not. Right now, the market is putting a premium on properties that are next to roads. Now, what I would say critically is that we don't really know if those proxies of value are going to actually pan out and be as valuable as we think they will be. We don't know. So getting back to the whole concept of speculators versus creators, this is part of the value of what the speculators are providing. They're asserting that they believe there is some sort of value, but they may be wrong. And together we're going to find out. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we'll just, one more question, then we'll wrap it up.
Really quickly, just curious, are you allowing people to subdivide their actual land and try to resell that like the way you'd expect a developer to do so?
It won't be explicitly prohibited, but the protocol of, so as a landowner, I can specify one IPFS hash that defines the contents of my land. So if I'm doing the scheme that you're proposing, I would require that would require developing additional layers of complexity. It's possible to do,
okay,
but it requires someone to take on that effort. If you want to automate it, then it requires a smart contract to be able to purchase it and then have subdivided parcels. So it's possible.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we'll just wrap up with each of you answering a question. So we talk about tokens and platforms. In each of your individual cases, what do you think is the biggest challenge of how you're kind of looking to run your token in a holistic way that will drive the value of your overall platform, as a closing remark?
I think the biggest challenge for us is we're using our token as a reward mechanism, so we need to create stability in terms of the value of the token. So that's going to be an ongoing challenge for us. And I guess the way that we are facing that right now is it's all about getting quality content into the platform. So utility creates demand. And the best way for us to create utility is to have quality content within the platform.
I think for us, because we didn't begin a project from scratch, and Minecraft, Roblox, and Sandbox are still like very popular in the kids community. That's one of the biggest challenges to hope that all the crypto wallets going to be more accessible and to have more kids, like to be kids friendly. And then like I think Decentraland are addressing certain kind of people, and we will need to address and build a token economy around not only kids but like I guess like teenagers and open new kind of market, which I am really excited to see how they're gonna react.
Yeah, I would actually tend to agree. I think the biggest challenge right now for the growth of any of these projects is getting non-crypto fanatics to be able to use this stuff. So I will gloss over the fact that 3D and VR and smart contracts is hard, but to some degree those are solved problems. Like there are teams that have done this stuff before. What I have not seen is an interface that allows my mom to actually interface with CryptoKitties. It doesn't exist yet. There are lots of people working on this challenge, but I do think that right now that is the biggest unsolved problem that will prevent a wider adoption of all of these projects.
Yep, good. Thank you very much, panel.